Sony's battle for video game supremacy. Sony is a leading global manufacturer in the audio, video, and communication industries. It has the headquarters based in Tokyo, and it has ranked 94 on the global Fortune 500. It specializes in making video games, televisions, headphones, and smartphones, making it one of the world's most valuable brands with a market cap at $17 billion. This company began in 1946 when Masaru Ibuka started an electronics shop in a department store building in Tokyo with a total of 8 employees. Later, on May the same year, Ibuka was joined by Akio Morita to establish a company called Tokyo Telecommunications Engineering Corporation. Later, on 1958, the company changed its name to Sony. Sony Computer Entertainment is best known for producing the popular line of PlayStation consoles. The line grew out of a failed partnership with Nintendo. Originally, Nintendo requested Sony to develop an add-on for its console that would play compact discs. In 1991, Sony announced the add-on as well as a dedicated console known as the PlayStation. However, a disagreement over software licensing for the console caused the partnership to fall through. Sony then continued the project independently. Sony will release their first console, the PlayStation, in 1994, to both critical and commercial success. So much that Sony Computer Entertainment would go on to sell 100 million units around the world, becoming the first company to ever manufacture a system to break this record in the gaming business. Their successor, the PlayStation 2, was built in the foundation that the PlayStation set for it and from its launch in March 2000 to its eventual discontinuation in 2013, will go on to sell an unprecedented 155 million units around the world before its discontinuation. This will make the PlayStation 2 the greatest selling home console of all time and one of the longest supported game systems of recent times. To understand this success, it's necessary to see what the competition had to offer. Beginning with the PlayStation 1, or what is commonly called the first generation of gaming consoles, the closest competitors were the Nintendo 64 and the Sega Saturn. For the Nintendo 64, most critics agree that the reason of its great loss in comparison with the PlayStation 1 in terms of sales was their hesitation of using CDs as their form factor of games. These consoles still use cartridges, limiting their performance and especially for titles that needed that extra space for 3D models and textures. This movement from 2D to 3D will continue to this day to the point that barely any games in 2D are made by major production companies. And the Sega Saturn was a console developed by Sega to compete directly against the PlayStation 1 and the Nintendo 64. But unlike the last one, the Sega Saturn did make the jump to optical technology. However, of the three consoles, it was the worst performer with a mere 9.5 million units sold worldwide, more than 10 times less than the PlayStation 1. The reason for its failure was the lack of recognizable titles. The Nintendo 64 had some of the most recognizable intellectual properties in video games, like the Mario Brothers, and thus it was able to stay somehow afloat. The Sega Saturn had nothing of this caliber to sustain itself, so it was an economic failure. History repeated itself with the release of the PlayStation 2. In this generation, the direct competition came from Microsoft with the Xbox and Nintendo with the GameCube. This era where Sony found his biggest success with 158 million units sold. The GameCube had a mere 21.74 million units sold, and some of its failure can be attributed to its tampering with the format of its games. In this case, Nintendo published games in a proprietary format that looked like a miniature CD. This was to discourage piracy, which was a big problem on the previous generation of consoles, but that resulted to be expensive to produce and thus provoked a shortage of supply. As for the Xbox, it was the first console to have downloadable content, as well as private servers for online play against other players. However, it will be a long time before these technologies really took off, but when they did, they really blew the game. The Nintendo 64 was behind its times. Both the Sega Saturn and Xbox were ahead of these times, but the PlayStation 1 and 2 were the only consoles that were able to utilize the technology available at the moment to its full potential. In the end, the most important reason of its success was that it was released at the right time and with just the right technology for each generation. These great successes had put Sony comfortably at the preferred player of the start of the third generation of consoles. However, the company was put to come against the biggest obstacle they've ever faced until now, the PlayStation 3. The complete failure of the PlayStation 3 can be debatable. However, it cannot be denied that the results of the third generations of consoles were not the ones that Sony predicted. The PlayStation 3 was Sony's worst performing console so far.